Hi, today I'm going to show you how I make sprites for a character walk cycle using Open Toonz. Well, I'm not only using Open Toonz. It is possible to draw in Open Toonz, but I don't really got to a point of being able to draw in Open Toonz on a level even close to what I can do in other programs. So I will draw with FireAlpaca and load the images into Open Toonz and animate them there. The one tool in Open Toonz that I find most useful in making this kind of sprites is the plastic tool. That is what makes it useful to use Open Toonz instead of doing the whole process in FireAlpaca. So, this is how I set up the drawing. We have a full body profile. We have a second leg as a separate image, and this is just a copy of that part of the full body image. Then we have images of two arms, or rather one image of an arm and one copy of that image, with a small redraw of the hand, since we will have the palm of the hand facing different ways from the viewer's viewpoint. I also have a separate image of the bottom of the character's tunic, because I want to have separate movements of that part. Had I included it as a part of the full body image, those movements would have influenced other parts of the full body image. An alternative could have been to end the full body image with the tunic and have both legs as separate images. With a long skirt, I would probably have gone that way. Sometimes I do the head as a separate image for a similar reason. A cape would be an example of a different item that would be a separate image. Something like a sword hanging from the belt would also be a separate image to allow it to swing a bit as the character walks. So, I cut up the image in separate images for each of the separate parts and load them into Open Toonz in different columns. It is important to have the columns in the right order. The back arm and leg need to come before the full body image. The bottom of the tunic comes next, and the front arm is the last image. If the columns get loaded in the wrong order, it is easily fixed, as the columns can be dragged sidewise, making a new order. We will now go to the plastic tool. For each of the images that we will use the plastic tool on, we first need to create a mesh. The mesh will occupy a separate column. Every action will have to be done in the mesh column. It is important not to do any actions in the image column, not even before the mesh is constructed. Next step is to add a skeleton to the mesh. This will give us a way to apply the plastic effect. The skeleton starts with a root vertices, and from that you build up the skeleton by making new vertices. You can go back to a vertices somewhere along the skeleton, click on it and start a new branch from that vertex. Build the skeleton mostly like a stick figure. A vertex can be used to move a part of the image. Sometimes you will want to place a vertex to keep that part from moving when other parts of the image is moving. One example is the image with the bottom of the tunic. I want the bottom part of the tunic to move, but not the top part. The top part of that image need to connect seamless with the main body image. When all images have their mesh and skeleton, it is time to put them in their positions compared to each other, and then we will start animating them. I will make the animation 30 frames long. That doesn't mean that I will have 30 frames in the final sprite. I will go for 6 frames. but 30 frames gives more room for working the animation, and this will affect the walk cycle even if we don't use all the 30 frames for the final sprite. To help with the animation, I put in a line representing the ground. In a walk cycle, you will have a bit of going up and down of the head. With this method, you get that automatically, since when the feet are furthest away from each other, the body and the head will necessarily be closer to the ground than when one leg is straight and directly under the body. I usually start with a full stride in the first frame and set the last frame to the same position. One thing I have noticed is that the walk will look more natural if we have the toes, respectively the heel, touch the ground rather than the sole. Then I go to the middle frame, in this case frame 15, and set the animation of the legs to the opposite full stride. Already with this we have a fair start of the walk cycle, but the legs will go down under the ground level when they are in the middle. So now we go to the middle points between the full stride positions. That would be 7.5 frame from the first frame, but we can of course only work with whole frames, so I go to frame 7 and frame 22 for this. So here we need to move the full body image up and adjust the leg image position accordingly. We will now have the basics for a walk movement in place. For the legs, we still need to determine which leg is touching the ground and which is moving forward. We then use the plastic tool to adjust the leg that is not touching the ground, so it's slightly bent and the foot is a bit above the ground. We will probably have to adjust the angle of the foot. This should take care of the legs and the general up and down movement. We can run the walk cycle and tweak stuff as needed. Next we have the arms. They will swing intact with the legs, but generally in the opposite direction. The swinging part will be handled by setting the full stride frames. We also need to adjust the position of the arm according to the up and down movement of the body, and we have another movement to take into consideration. When walking, the shoulders will swing back and forth a bit. We will adjust for this with putting the top of the arm as far back as possible within the body when swung fully back, and the opposite when swung as far forward as possible. We only need to do this for the front arm. For the back arm, this would not really be noticeable. With a slightly bent arm, you might not even need to use the plastic tool for the arms, but it is nice to have the option. Changing the angle of the hand in some positions can help to make the walk look more natural. The bottom of the tunic needs to be adjusted for height, and the movement of the bottom part should follow the flow of the walk. A final touch is that in 1 or 2 frames make a very small bending of the neck. It is a small thing that is not consciously noticeable, but still help to make the character look more alive. Run the animation and tweak parts you think need tweaking until you are happy with the result. Next part is rendering the images. I set steps to 5, which will give me 6 frames for this walk cycle. You might want to have a larger number of frames for a smoother animation. You would probably not want fewer. I render the images as PNG and will get a transparent background. There is also an option to render the images as a sprite sheet. I then go to FireAlpaca and crop the images so that the empty space around the images are not too big. At this stage it is also possible to make corrections if the bending process using the plastic tool has created something that looks wrong. That can happen. I also resize the images down to the biggest size I will be using in a game or a video. Sizing an image up in a game or a video will seldom look good. And here we have the sprite walking across a background. Well, that is all for this time. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.